Hey, how we doing? So just figured we'd come back on here and make another video today. It's been a few days since I did this, so figured it's time to get back in the Word and see what we can learn today. So first and foremost, want to just say all praise, glory, and honor be to the Most High God, and to His Son, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. Um, another day that we're alive, another day that we're here. All glory to God for that. So with that being said, we want to just jump right into it, and what we're gonna talk about today is the sons of God, as referenced in Genesis chapter 6. This seems to be a topic that is kind of controversial in the modern day church. Um, there's a lot of differing beliefs on it. And most of the time, in all honesty, people just don't like to talk about it. It makes them uncomfortable for whatever reason. But let's just jump right in and see what it says for ourselves. So we're going to go to Genesis chapter 6. And here we see, so Genesis chapter 6, we'll read verses 1 to 4. It says, "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown." So, if we see here, right here in verse 2, it says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, all of which they chose. Then it goes on to tell us that these earthly women, that they bare children, and they were giants, mighty men of old, men of renown. And on the surface, you look at that and you say, that sounds exactly what it sounds like. Sons of God came in, and when I hear sons of God, I'm thinking angels. It says it came in, they mated with human women, and they bare giants. Um, a big doctrine, the teaching that's going around in the modern church is that these sons of God were the bloodline of Seth, because Adam and Eve, they had Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel, and then they had Seth, and Seth began a bloodline that lived righteously as opposed to Cain. So they're just saying, well, these sons of God were just mighty men, and the daughters of men were wicked men, wicked a wicked bloodline after the bloodline of Cain. But when you read your Bible and you look through scriptures and you go precept upon precept, it doesn't really add up. So let's break these few verses down and see what they're talking about. So first and foremost, giants. They mention giants. People hear that and they think fairy tale, mysticism, mythical stuff. That's those sort of thing. But let's see if the Bible actually says anything else about giants. So another verse that I like to go to in reference to that is in the book of Numbers, and it's chapter 13, verse 33. And now the background of the story is that they were going throughout the land, and they had picked a few men to go and scout the land that they were trying to go into. And the men went into the land, they scouted, and they came back and gave the report, and they said, "And there we saw the giants, the sons of Enoch, which come of the giants, and we in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." So right here, he's just saying, they scouted this land, and in this land, he said, we've seen giants. Flat out, we've seen them. And somebody can say, oh, well, that's just symbolism for this or that. They were great, big, strong warriors. But no, then he goes to say, well, we are grasshoppers in their sight. We were tiny in their sight. We were small, and they are much bigger. And just like it says, very popular story, I'm sure people are familiar with, David and Goliath. In First Samuel chapter 17, it goes to tell us how big Goliath is, and it says he's, what is it, 5, 6 cubits tall. And based off history, the way they did a cubit, it's about, they would say, roughly from your elbow to your wrist or the point of your hand. On average, it would be 1 cubit's about 1.5 feet. So if we're going off that, Goliath was anywhere from 9 to 10 feet tall. Um, and then if you look in the book of Deuteronomy, it also goes to talk about Og, king of Bashan, who was another king in the land at that time, who the Hebrews went and reclaimed the land from. It goes to mention that he was 9 cubits tall. That's anywhere 13, 14, 15 feet tall. Well, I'm sorry, it says his bed was that big. So the Bible in different parts gives us kind of rough patches to go off of about how big some people were, just like it specifically tells us Goliath, and gives us an idea that, well, there were um, people, there were recordings of history of people being this big, people being bigger. So to me, it's not far-fetched to think, well, maybe Genesis chapter 6 means just what it says. Well, they were giants. Now, let's go back to, that's just touching on the idea of giants. Let's go back to the idea of the sons of God. Like I said, a lot of people think the sons of God is referring to the godly bloodline of Seth. But when you do a little more digging, it starts to muddy that doctrine, that idea. Because the phrase that's used in the Hebrew Bible for sons of God in the Hebrew is B'nai Elohim. And that phrase is only used 5 times in all of the Hebrew Bible. The 2 times it's used in Genesis 6, and then it's used 3 times in the book of Job. And we'll head over there now to see what exactly they were talking about in the book of Job. So if you go to Job in the 1st chapter and the 6th verse, it says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them." Now that's chapter 1, verse 6. And then you go forward, chapter 2, verse 1, just a little bit up further in the story. It says, "Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord." Now, this is talking about a time when everything with the book of Job happened, when Job was living this righteous lifestyle, and he was blessed, plentiful with his children, his land, his crops, his his animals, everything. And God and Satan had a conversation, and Satan ended up going and tempting Job, and all these things happened to Job. Um, you can look more in the book of Job to see more details about that. But each time you see this is a divine encounter, that Satan's coming before God and speaking to God, and there's also angels with him, sons of God. It's using that same B'nai Elohim as it is in Genesis chapter 6. And some people can brush over that and say, oh well, he just came in the presence of other people, this and that. I hear stories left and right about it. But if you go further ahead to Job chapter 38. Now, this is the point of the story. After all Job's trials and tribulations, he kind of gets fed up with it, and he starts complaining, and pretty much shaking his fist at the sky, for lack of better words. And God comes down to speak to him, and God kind of is, giving him the business, saying, "Who are you to say these things? Who are you to do this? Who are you to do that? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth, or when I created this or that?" And if you look at Job chapter 38, verse 7, it says, or I'll read from verse 5 to 7 to give a little context. It says, "Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy." Now we say, okay, here's that same phrase, sons of God. Now, like I said, precept upon precept, context is important. Right here, God is explaining to Job, where were you when I created everything, when I laid the foundations? And right here, he's saying, when I laid the foundations of the earth, and the angels, um, I'm sorry, he says in the sons of God, he says in the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Well, man wasn't created yet. The foundations of the earth were still being laid. Men weren't created till the 6th day. This was when the earth itself was being formed. So right here we have that same phrase, sons of God, being used just like it is in the other 4 times in the Hebrew Bible, all in reference of angels. This right here, I feel, is the icing on the cake in regards to that specific phrase of who it's talking about. And it's saying right here, sons of God, some type of being that was around as God was creating the earth before mankind ever existed. And then there's another time here in the book of Hosea. We're going to go over there, Hosea chapter 1, verse 10, where it says sons of God. But the kicker here, the difference is, it doesn't, and when you look into the Hebrew, it doesn't say B'nai Elohim. Now, if you're reading just a regular English Bible, like we read, like we know how to read, you see, oh, well, it says sons of gods again, and this time it's referring to people. It must be the same thing, or we can't be sure. But like I said, when you dig a little deeper and you find out that it's the word, I forget if it's B'nai Ale or Elah. It's a different word, but it's not B'nai Elohim. It's a completely different reference to completely different people. Isaiah 1:10 reads, "Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, Ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, Ye are the sons of the living God." And like I said, this is a completely different reference because the author, who God divinely inspired, saw fit to use different wording, different phrasing. Those reading the Hebrew Bible at the time, these Hebrew scriptures, would have knew that this is not the same sons of God that we see in Genesis 6 or in the three accounts of Job. So that it goes. I mean, it's very telling, that little bit of information alone. But when you go to look a little further, we see that through the sacrifice of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, that we have been blessed with everything. We've been blessed with salvation. We've been brought back to God, reconciled back to God through His grace. And through that, we've been blessed to become sons of God. Christ is the first fruits, the first creature, the first creation back to God through His death, burial, and resurrection. And when we look to get a better understanding of what exactly I'm trying to say, if you go to First John, or John in the first chapter, if you read the 12th verse, it goes to say, "But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name." So right there, God, it's saying that as many as received him, as many as received Christ, we were given the power to become sons of God, those who believed on his name. Now, this couldn't be until Christ came, until the prophecy was fulfilled and he died for us, and God rose him again. So, if we're going off that, if we have the chance to become sons of God once we believe on his name, how then were there already sons of God in this same reference in Genesis 6, back in the realm of the creation? It just doesn't add up. And even Ephesians goes to talk on that a little bit more. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 5 and 6, it says, "Having predestined us unto the adoption of children by Jesus Christ to himself, according to the good pleasure of his will, to praise the glory of his grace, wherein he hath made us accepted in the beloved." And right there, again, it says, "Having predestined us unto the adoption of children through Jesus Christ." And it just seems to follow a pattern. And we know that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. We see through the Hebrew Bible and the references in the Old Testament that these sons of God were used to refer to angels. And then in regards to Adam, the first man created, when we look in Luke chapter 3, verse 38, it goes to say, it's given a genealogy, just to give context, it's given a genealogy listing a father, then his son, then his son, then his son. So verse 38 says, "Which was the son of Enos, which was the son of Seth, which was the son of Adam, which was the son of God." So right here, when we put these things together and we wrap it up in a bundle, it seems to be that the only ones referred to as sons of God before the time of Christ, before him reconciling us back to God through his sacrifice, the only ones referred to as sons of God were direct creations of God. We know the angels weren't born of mother and father; they were created by God. We know Adam wasn't born from a mother and a father; he was created from the dust of the earth, right, directly from God. And God blew the breath of life into his nostrils, and he became a living being. So that we can see that, like I said, that's why it's so important. Context, precept upon precept, line upon line. We have to just dig deeper and look in to see what exactly the scriptures are telling us. That's why the Bible tells us, show yourself to be a study. Um, and another big thing that people like to use, in the book of Matthew, there's an account where some religious leaders are asking Christ, what's going to happen after, in the resurrection, or they use the story of, oh, well, a man dies and then his brother takes his wife to be, and then that brother dies, and then so on and so forth. And they say, well, who's gonna be her husband in the resurrection? They were trying to trip him up. And let's go look at it and see exactly what it says. That's Matthew chapter 22, and he goes to say, he said, "You do err, not knowing the scriptures, nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. And now people take that verse and they say, see, right there, it says they're not going to marry. They can't be given in marriage. They're as the angels in heaven. It says that there's no way the sons of God is referring to that. But every word in the scriptures is important. And I don't think it's a coincidence that right here Christ chose to use the words, um, nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. Now he could have just said the angels of God. Everybody's going to know who he's talking about. But he decided to say angels of God in heaven because, just as we know, as the book of Genesis tells us, the angels, they seen the sons of God. They seen the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they came down. They took wives to them. The only way they can take the wives of them if they left heaven and came down and and mated with these women here. Just like it tells us in the book of Daniel that when the angel Gabriel came to speak to Daniel in regards to a vision, it refers to Daniel as, or refers to Gabriel as a man. Daniel's description of him was as a man, just like in Genesis, the two accounts where when the three angels come to Abraham and he prepares food for them and they eat together, or when the two angels come to Lot and he prepares food for them and they eat together, we see that angels, when they're here and they're interacting with us, they take on these human qualities. They eat, they sit with us, and just like in Genesis chapter 6, they can do other things, and they did so by taking women, and mating with them and bearing children. So all these arguments you hear towards it, or all these ideas, these doctrines, they just don't line up with what the scriptures themselves actually say, and that's what it comes down to. In regards to speaking on the scriptures in the Bible, it's not about opinions; it's about what the Word actually says. Um, and where a lot of this comes from too, which is why there's a lot of controversy, is because what is known as the Book of Enoch. A lot of people take the Book of Enoch as something of the devil, or just a a made up writing, not significant. I myself, you can have your own opinion on it. I personally see it as divinely inspired. You can read it for yourself and get your own opinion on it. But we see that in the Book of Enoch, specifically in the Book of Watchers, which is in the Book of Enoch. It gives us a deeper story in regards to the Genesis chapter 6 account, and tells us the names of these angels and what exactly they did and what their punishment was and who they spoke to and how they spoke to Enoch and all these different things. And that's where it comes from. Because if you even look in the book of Jude, um, Jude's just one chapter long. So the 14th and 15th verses, it says, "And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." So this right here, you can find that same exact um, verse, pretty much verbatim, right out of the book of Enoch, and that's where he's taking this from. So we know that there's an understanding of this among the New Testament writers of what the Book of Enoch is, and what it talks about. Because in the Book of Enoch, it even goes to tell us that, when these things happen, God passes judgment on these angels, and he binds them. The one angel's name is Azazel, and he says to bind Azazel hand and foot, and place him in bondage in the earth until the day of judgment comes. So he's telling us that he's going to bind these angels in chains, unlock them away till the day of judgment. It's ironic. It's, for those who don't believe that the sons of God are the angels, it's ironic to see that, because if you go into the book of Second Peter and the book of also again in the book of Jude, they have a series of verses that are pretty much the same exact thing. They're saying the same exact thing. And I'll just read it to give you a little bit of understanding. In Second Peter chapter 2, verse 4, it says, "For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment." You see that nowhere else in our Bible does it tell us about angels being punished or cast into chains or thrown into darkness for punishment, for judgment. So it leaves you wondering, so, well, what is it talking about? Because it's referenced here as if it's already known, and the reason it was is because it already was known, because the book of Enoch was already well known to them at that time, in that day and age. Um, and like I said, it's also again in the book of Jude. We'll start from verse 5 and we'll read down a little bit. It says, I will therefore put you in remembrance, though ye once knew this, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them that believed not. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. So right there, just like we mentioned before, that he says, and the angels which kept not their first estate, which was heaven, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. You only find these things mentioned in the book of Enoch. Why would God leave us sitting here scratching our heads saying, what is he talking about, when these people clearly knew what they were writing about? He said, line upon line, precept upon precept. We continue to read these stories and these accounts and these scriptures, just like it mentions all the way at the back at the beginning of your Bible in Genesis chapter 6. And it gives you clarity on what exactly he's talking about. And even here in Jude, I think the icing on the cake is when you read a little bit further. The next verse, verse 7, it says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. So right before that, in verse 6, he says, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto judgment of the great day. Then even as Sodom and Gomorrah. So he's comparing this right there with the phrase even as, he's comparing this to the angels to the situation in Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, when you read about Sodom and Gomorrah in the 19th chapter of Genesis, it was an unruly city, very filled with fornication and sexual immoralities, homosexuality, all these different types of things. To have an understanding of why he's comparing this, it says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh. Now he uses the phrase going after strange flesh because we see um, a lot of homosexuality, which is spoken against, commanded against in the scriptures through God, from God through the scriptures. That's what a lot of the men were doing in Sodom and Gomorrah. So that's why he uses the phrase going after strange flesh, because man was created for woman and woman for man. That's natural, but it's unnatural. It's strange when you see man and woman. Just the same way it is. It's very strange for an angel and a human being. It's different flesh. It's different. Just like there's another part in the scriptures where it tells us there's one flesh for the fish of the sea, one flesh for the birds of the air, one flesh for man, celestial bodies and terrestrial bodies. All this stuff comes around full circle when you really just look at it a little deeper and dig a little deeper. And right here it tells us, it compares the angels who left their first estate, who are now being punished, held in darkness to the day of judgment, which is only referenced in the book of Enoch in that specific way, compares them to the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, of sexual immorality, going after strange flesh. To me, it's very obvious. Like I said, the Hebrew reading of the phrase is the context of who sons of gods are, and when we can become sons of God, and then when you look deeper into the book of Enoch and what it tells us through this. So, oh yeah, like I always say, don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Read the book of Enoch. More importantly, read the Bible. See if it lines up. See if what Enoch's saying matches up with what the scriptures say, and use your own discernment and judge for yourself. But the most important thing to remember is that all in all, regardless of some disagreements some people might have or how we see one thing or another, the most important thing is that Jesus is Lord. Um, Christ is risen. He's in heaven right now with our Father, and he will be back to set things straight, to come back, take care of us. Just remember that. All praise, glory, and honor be to the Most High God and to his Son, Yeshua HaMashiach. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that.